Promote a culture of inclusion, supercharge your communication, and unleash the full potential of your teams and leaders with the Inclusive Handbook collection from the Diversity Movement. As part of the collection, I wrote the Inclusive Leadership Handbook with Kurt Merriweather to empower leaders with tools needed to cultivate a culture that fosters creativity, innovation, and employee engagement. Through strategies, exercises, and self-reflection, leaders at all levels can enhance their effectiveness. Learn more at thediversitymovement.com/store. Use code HOL at checkout for 25% of your first order. Do you want to build your brand by being a guest on industry-leading podcasts? If you're a business leader, an author, or a speaker, my guess is that you do. Picture this. You, a dynamic executive easily connecting with engaged audiences, turbocharging your top-of-funnel marketing, and creating a treasure trove of content with every episode. Podcasting is a game changer that you've been waiting for. And podcastally.com is your VIP ticket to podcast PR success. Say goodbye to the ordinary and hello to the extraordinary exposure. Let the Podcast Ally team connect you with the best-in-class podcast for you to be a guest on. Head over to podcastally.com and use the promo code DT for a 10% discount on Podcast Ally services. That's podcastally.com, promo code DT. Welcome to High Octane Leadership with Donald Thompson. This season, we're diving deeper with more solo episodes, where I'll share the experiences that have led to recognition by EY, Forbes, Fast Company, and others. Not as a boast, but as milestones on my entrepreneurial path. From growing multi-million-dollar firms to successful business exits and building high-performance teams with a global perspective. I'll reveal the insights and strategies from my journey and share them with you so that we can win together. Alongside these solo episodes, we'll have industry visionaries and thought leaders, and we'll explore effective leadership. Ready to empower your leadership journey with real success stories? Let's embark on this transformational journey together. In this episode, I'm talking with Jackie Ferguson, co-founder and vice president of content, programming, and products at the Diversity Movement. Jackie is the best-selling author of the Inclusive Language Handbook and hosts the top-ranking Diversity Beyond the Checkbox podcast. Her impactful work earned her a spot on the 2023 Inc. Female Founders 200 list and garnered awards from Fast Company and other globally recognized publications. Thanks for joining me on the show, Jackie.
I'm so glad to be back, Don, and thanks for having me. The first topic that we're going to talk about, or this podcast, is going to be on strategies for deepening employee engagement. And, as we think about employee engagement, we've all heard it, right? This is important. And employee engagement stands as a factor in the success of any business and an important factor. It transcends job satisfaction, encapsulating an employee's sense of purpose and commitment and enthusiasm toward their work and the company. And in today's business environment, fostering a culture of engagement fuels productivity, and it also drives innovation, reduces turnover, and enhances customer satisfaction, which leaders are talking about. But here's the thing. Every leader has heard that increasing employee engagement is good for business, but so many of us don't know what that means or how to make that work. And worse, many leaders make the assumption that employees are engaged, right? So let's take a closer look at understanding what employee engagement is, how it's measured, and how to increase it within your organization. So Don, my first question for you is, how do you define employee engagement within your organization?
So, Jackie, thanks for that question. One of the things with employee engagement, and I'll give this from a CEO perspective, and then we'll look at it from a couple different lenses, from an employee lens, a leadership lens. You can be present, but not productive. And I'll use myself personally as an example. So let's say I'm watching a show on television, but it's a show that I'm kind of into. Well, then that means I have my phone up. That means I might be reading something else. That means I'm kind of listening to the contextual and the body language of the characters, but I'm not fully engaged. I'm present, but I'm not fully engaged, which means I'm not catching nuance. It means there's some things I'm naturally going to miss. It means that I can kind of take it or leave it on that given day, that given hour. And so that is a way of thinking about employee engagement from a lack of employee engagement, right? Now, if I look at something that I'm very engaged in, right? I'm very focused on that particular show, that meeting. I'm very engaged in that product that I'm working on, and I'm not doing anything else. I am immersed in that interaction with another individual, an interaction with that television show, that training video, because I'm trying to gain something from the experience every moment in time that I'm involved. And so if we think about employee engagement from a personal perspective, that's a high level distinction and a high level difference. The other way to think about it now from a more corporate speak standpoint is when we think about productivity. Again, someone can be present for 8 hours a day. Somebody that's super productive is going to do the job they need to do in those 5, 6, 7 hours. And because they're productive, they're usually going to have new ideas of how to do it better. They're going to have time to support their teammates because they're looking around the edges of a problem. So instead of reviewing a report for executives and saying, oh, that's pretty good, the engaged employee will say, this is a good start. Here are 2 or 3 additions. Here is another article that we can reference. So the difference between engagement and being present is pretty significant for business leaders. And a lot of times in corporations today, people are present.
That's right, Don. Now, how do you get a pulse on how engaged employees are in the workplace, right? Because a lot of, like I said, a lot of leaders say, oh, yeah, my employees are engaged, right? Because they're measuring it on presence, they're measuring it on the staring at the screen or whatever. But how do you get a real pulse on how engaged employees are in the workplace?
One of the things I do as a leader to get a sense for that, quite frankly, is that engaged employees are giving feedback on a pretty routine basis. They're not just kind of turning in the work or sitting in review meetings of others. That active engagement shows itself in the fact that they're bringing new ideas to the table. Another way to show active engagement for employees is how they complement their teammates, right? Because an engaged employee is looking at what they're doing, but they're also noticing exceptional performance of others. Engaged employees volunteer for additional work that interests them. So if there's a new committee, if there's something we're doing for service for the community, if they hear their leader, in my case, on a podcast or in a meeting, in a town hall meeting, and I use something that's not inclusive language, an engaged employee will send me a note. So engaged employees are typically going to have tells where they're going above and beyond. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be working 70 hours a week to be an engaged employee. I'm not measuring it in hours. I'm measuring it in the type of behaviors we see from engaged employees versus those that are just putting in the time to get to 5 o'clock. And those are a couple of very significant examples. Your highest level of engagement are those employees that are going to see things that need changing, and they're going to have the psychological safety and the space to give feedback that is somewhat constructive for the organization. But they're not doing it with a whiny temperament, with a them first temperament. They're doing it from a space of protecting the business and growing the business. I'll give a quick example of an engaged employee. There was I used to run a software technology firm many years ago, but this is a phenomenal example. Early in my career, I used to use a lot of football analogies, sports analogies. And I remember this gentleman on our team is one of our senior designers, technical architects. And he came up to me after the meeting and he said, Don, we love the company, what we're doing. We appreciate your passion as a leader. But if you keep using football analogies and none of us ever played football, you're going to lose our attention. An engaged employee gave me the option to be better, right? Because they cared that my message was getting across to the full team and they gave me feedback that could help me grow as a communicator, help me grow as a business leader. And then they took that risk to share something constructively critical, right, for the betterment of the communication for the whole team. And so those are some tells, if you will, that I look for when I think about employee engagement from that leadership perspective and point of view.
That's so helpful, Don. Thanks for that. Don, can you share an example where you saw the impact of high or low employee engagement directly influencing a project or outcome?
So we have a history of innovation at the diversity movement, which is the company I'm currently the CEO and leading that business. We were building out a product called LeaderView, which is a cultural competency assessment tool for leadership teams. So instead of just looking at the individual, we look at the competency, the chemistry, the way that leadership teams work together against 7 competencies. During the evaluation of different products and services, several of our team members said, we shouldn't use a third party tool for this. We should build our own tool. Knowing that building our own tool was going to take thousands of hours in research, in production, in cost, versus using a third party tool off the shelf, white labeling it, and reselling it. So I saw employee engagement, a team of folks presenting a new idea, even though adopting that new idea meant more work for them, meant extra hours for them, additional pressure for them. And so that is an example of employee engagement that, in deference to what the company needed to do, they put the best idea forward, even though in the short term, it actually would increase their workload. And so that's an example to me of employee engagement. And that meant that this individual, this team, in particular, Andy on our team of the diversity movement, was leading the charge with this. And they were very focused on what was going to help our customers win in the workplace first and their personal workload second. And so I'm super proud of that. But that's an example of an engaged employee in terms of employee experience.
That's fantastic. Don, let's talk about the impact of engagement on business success. So, highly engaged employees generate 18% more in sales and are 14% more productive. And that's like getting a month of additional work from an employee. So, a significant difference in engaged employees. In your experience, how has employee engagement directly contributed to the success of your business?
One of the things I've been really fortunate is to work in both product technology driven organizations as well as consulting organizations to where there is more people out front delivering against your consulting offerings. If you think about businesses like a financial service business, a bank, and frontline professionals, your tellers, your bank managers, your loan officers. If you think about the car business, if you think about your sales professionals, your service professionals, if you think about going into your local supermarket or Target or different things and your interaction with staff, we buy more from places where we feel valued. And the way we feel valued is based on our interaction with the individuals that represent a brand. And so when you think about employee engagement and the impact on the bottom line, right, you think about going into a store to buy a gift for a loved one, right? And that sales professional is not just trying to upsell you for the dollars, they're trying to get you the best gift possible for the price point within your budget. And then all of a sudden, like I'll use Sylvester at the Acura dealership in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Over the course of my relationship with this one car dealership, I've probably purchased 10 cars over the last 15 years. And I go back to the same sales professional because I've been treated well, the relationship's good, the product lived up to its standard, but that engagement has allowed it to be easier to do the second and third and fourth and fifth transaction. So if you think about any line of business, what grows a business and a brand long term? Repeat customers. It is less expensive to keep a customer than it is to garner a new customer. So that means when we're thinking about businesses of any type, like the examples I used, that employee engagement that turns into outstanding customer service is a prescription for success. Jamie Osterart on our team within the diversity movement, our team has a 93% client satisfaction score for the last 2 years running. That means that the team that we've put in front of clients, the products that we've delivered to clients are highly valuable, highly effective, and people appreciate the service. Well, that means when they need additional work on their culture, organizational change, leadership development, they're going to call us at the diversity movement first. We're not going to win the business every time, but we always want to be in the consideration set and in the top 3. So to answer your question on the business value of employee engagement, whether it's in the car business, whether it is in the technology business, whether it is in the organizational change business or consulting, people buy from people they trust. People buy from people who have delivered on their promises, and engaged employees deliver on their promises. And that's what we want our clients to feel. And then they buy more and they buy longer in terms of the relationship with us.
That makes sense. Don, could you share a specific instance where increased employee engagement led to innovation or significant growth within your company? And again, it's interesting that you've worked in so many different industries, right? So I'm interested in if you've got a story to share there.
So when we think about employee engagement and innovation, I'll actually use a negotiation that we were in the software business when I was working with Grant Willard, my mentor and good friend, when I was in the technology space. And I'll bounce around across different industries because I want folks to understand that this construct of employee engagement is universal, both from a global footprint, but also across different industries. And so in this example, we were negotiating a contract. We were a small multi-million dollar firm negotiating with a multi-billion dollar software company. And we were about 15%, 20% away from one another in this contract in terms of some of the financial parameters. And the larger organizations simply wouldn't budge in terms of the number of people that they would fund on this consulting contract. And so we looked at different ways. We talked to our champion within the organization. And then we thought and said, wait a minute, we're all working together. We want this to be fruitful for all the parties involved. One of the reasons we can't get this contract through is because we're using different language in the way that we're delivering this message than the larger company was accustomed to. And so one of the senior leaders that wanted us to get this deal done said, why don't we change the language, and instead of using software developers, we add some additional headcount in the QA engineer section, because this larger company was very big on quality. And so anything quality related, because their software was used by John Deere, was used by Raytheon, was used by Lockheed Martin, some of the largest manufacturers in the world, we were able to, with innovative language, overcome a financial issue within a very high octane negotiation. And so innovation isn't always a new product. Sometimes innovation is the way you package something. Sometimes innovation is having a loss leader product. And so I'll use another example in terms of what we've been doing at the diversity movement. We have a product called DEI Essentials. Now, it's a 90-minute primer in terms of thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion. Well, initially, our team built a 5-module course, a lot of information, and our team came together and said, wait a minute, if we're going to a nice restaurant, wouldn't we expect an appetizer? So what's going to be the digital learning appetizer that we provide to our clients so they start to get comfortable with our tools, our training, our technology? And so our team created a bite-sized, snackable version of all of our information and knowledge into a new offering at $99 per seat that most everyone could afford. And we started to generate more and more revenue because people started with us because they gave our team, or our clients, a soft entry point. And then we grew a lot of accounts bigger. So that's one in terms of digital learning. That's an example in terms of contractual negotiation. But innovation is not always something new. Sometimes it's a new wrapper
Mm-hmm.
to help people understand better and can drive the business forward.
That's great, Don. Now, there are many strategies for boosting employee engagement, and we're going to discuss 6 of them, but I don't want to just list them off. I want to talk through how to activate that strategy. So let's go one at a time, if that's okay. The first, and you sent me this list, so I appreciate it, is transparent communication. How do you ensure transparent communication within your organization? And can you share how that's positively affected employee engagement?
One of the things with employee engagement are a couple of words that I think about all the time. One is trust, 2 is loyalty. You can't build trust with someone that you don't know. And so it's incumbent upon executives to create an environment where employees can get to know you. Depending on the size of your organization, there's different techniques and game plans towards it. Many organizations have town hall meetings. They'll have executive briefings. One CEO, Luann Welch at Easter Seals, North Carolina, $100 million organization. They serve 20,000 families across North Carolina. Every week, she sends a note to her entire employee base, right, with things she's thinking about, things she's learning, and with shout outs with people that are doing a wonderful job in the organization. So building trust is about open, honest, and consistent communication. And that helps to drive transparency because a lot of times your employees don't know what questions to ask about the business. So you as a leader have to be good at communicating what you're seeing, what you're learning, and what challenges you need to overcome. And it's also a great opportunity to share credit for new opportunities won and superstars that are developing within your organization. Because people build trust with you to the degree that you don't take all the credit for the or responsibility for the good things that are happening. Leaders build credit through recognition of others. Another example is being open to feedback and new learnings. A lot of organizations do pulse surveys and get a lot of feedback from their team, but then they never communicate how that feedback is being used, what they learned from that feedback, what new initiatives are started based on that feedback. And so you can create a very powerful impact wheel when you receive information, insight, new data from your team. You're not going to use it all, you're not going to agree with it all. But those things that you do agree with, that you do use, share that broadly with your team that you've done that. The other thing that I would say in terms of transparency, in terms of building that trust and that loyalty, right, that's very, very important in terms of the organization, is when you're having tough times. I've led businesses that are growing, that have been sold, and I've also led businesses that hit rough patches. You've got to talk about openly the rough patches as much as the successes, because everybody knows that there's no kind of straight line to success. There's some peaks, there's some valleys, there's some wins, there's some losses. But how you articulate the downtime and what you're going to do about it is also a way that people start to trust in your leadership, and then the way that they can anticipate, right, your behavior in the future, whether things are going amazingly or whether the organization needs to pivot and do a few things different.
Don, that's so smart. And I really like that last one because if you're looking for innovation within your team, there has to be some level of vulnerability, right? And you have to model that as a leader. If you're not sharing where you may have fallen short or an idea that didn't work, your employees are going to have a hard time sharing that with you. And so that I think all of those pieces so important, but that last piece, I just want to call attention to it because that's not the way leaders have worked in previous years, right? It was more top down, I've got all the answers situation, and that's not what employees want, and that's not what creates that employee engagement for them to be able to say, look, we tried this didn't work, this isn't going as planned, and that's very important as well. So, thanks for sharing that. The second piece is recognition and appreciation. So we talked about this a little bit within the transparent communication, but what innovative methods have you used to recognize and appreciate your employees? And how has this impacted their motivation and engagement levels?
People want to work at a place where they feel valued, but also that they get their star brighter, right? That they feel like that they are getting credit for the things that they've done well. I don't know that I have a lot of innovative techniques to that as much as I like to bring the spotlight to folks that are doing things that are amazing. And, in this case, you and I work together on a lot of projects and I couldn't have been more proud of you when you were named one of the top 200 female founders by Inc. magazine. Right? That was a great day when Jamie Osterhart was 40 under 40, right? In terms of locally here in Raleigh, North Carolina. When I see Shelley Willingham, our head of sales, it's on CNBC being interviewed, right? When I see Kurt Merriweather as the keynote speaker for the North Carolina Technology Association's DEI week, right? Those are things that I want to promote. Those are things that when we're recruiting very strong, powerful, smart, established individuals, that we want to create an environment where their star is not suppressed, right? Because of the ego of the leader, that their star is heightened, is shining, is brightened, right? Because we all want to win together and we all want to lift each other up. And so I think you have to create an environment where recognition is a part of the DNA, right? And that it is spread across the organization, right? And it's like this. As a business leader, and I would express this in the deepest level of sincerity I can for our listeners, right? If you can win by yourself, then your goals aren't big enough. And so, because I have high octane goals, because I want to dream without limitations, then that means I have to be able to recruit, reward, and retain some phenomenal individuals. And so I keep that in mind in terms of what that fuel is for your emerging and your leaders. Some of it is financial for sure, right? But a lot of it is, do they feel in an active way that you believe in them and appreciate who they are and what they're doing for the organization?
So, Don, one of the things that you said is about recruiting, and high performers want to see that spotlight moving around. They don't want it on the CEO show, right? And so, as you're thinking about hiring the people that you want to work with you, high performers that want to do amazing work, they want to see that. High level employees are looking at organizations and they're studying their social media and talking to employees, and they want to see that recognition and appreciation. So I think that's great, that's important to you as a leader. The third one is professional development. So can you discuss the role of professional development and employee engagement and share how your company supports employees' growth and learning?
Oh my gosh, I'll use personal experience and then some of the folks I've worked with. And I'll use some of the folks I worked with first. And I think about a gentleman named Greg Boone. I think about a gentleman named Tony Pease. I think about a gentleman named Brian Honorio that I've worked with. I think about a gentleman named Michael Bender. What do these folks have in common? They all used to work for me, and now they're and grew to CEOs in their own right. Abba Bowers at Walk West, right, which is a branding organization. Jason Gillikin, who runs a podcast production firm. And I could go on because there's probably 10 to 15 CEOs that didn't start out working with me that way and then evolved into broader roles, both within companies that I work with. They kind of bumped me out of the chair in a couple of cases, right, in a good way. And then in some cases, they rolled off to do their own things. So employee development to me means creating an environment where someone's dream in terms of their professional career and outcomes is enhanced because they decided to work with you. And so now let's drill down into what that means. That means you've got to work with people in the job they have while you're preparing them for the job in the future that they want. And if people feel that you are preparing them for the future that they want, you can coach them, right, in a firm but gracious way because they know that you're doing it to help them be better, learn more and faster, and achieve more. And when we have those shared outcomes together, those shared benefits together for successes, that creates that symbiotic relationship with your high performers. And I think it's really important for business leaders to know and understand what the goals and dreams are for the folks that they are depending on in their organization. One of the reasons I'm able to coach people reasonably well is I do spend time on what they want, right? Both inside the business and outside the business, depending on their ability to share that with me or their willingness to. And then we can tailor those job functions, those training opportunities to be able to do that. The second thing that I think is most important in learning and development is to create a coaching relationship in how you give feedback, right? So early in my career, I was not good at this, right? I was good at letting people know what was wrong, but not why they missed the mark and how to effectively address it. And so now when I give coaching that has some critique to it, right, I do a couple of things. Number one, here's where we missed the mark, right? Here's the gap between what's expected and what was delivered. And then I start to ask questions. Was there some level of understanding that I missed in terms of my communication to you of what we needed? Did you need some additional resource, right, in terms of what we're doing? Did something in the market change that we weren't aware of? I want to ask those questions because I don't want my team member to assume that I'm blaming them for the gap between expectation, right, and results. Certainly, some of that responsibility is on the team member, but I use three prongs when I think about performance and then learning and development and coaching. Number one, what did the company do? What could the company have done to provide better support? What could I have done as a manager? And what could you have done as the team member? Right? So if you think about corporation, manager, team member, and all those three elements play a part in the success of a project, in the success of going after a new opportunity. And then if there is a skills gap, we want to make sure that there's learning opportunities available both inside the business or outside courses or outside mentors. In certain cases with leaders, we'll get a professional coach to help. We'll send someone to training or certification, or maybe we have the knowledge and insights within the building, within the organization. But we do make sure that we provide both an explanation and communication of a performance gap or an opportunity to scale up. It's the performance of an individual in learning and development is not always negative. It may be somebody that's at a junior marketing position, but they're really ready to scale up. And we want to help take that individual to the next level. So we're investing in their future so they can do more, be more valuable, earn more, but we do it together. And so those are a couple of things that help me think about learning and development, but really from a leader's responsibility to their team members.
Yeah, that makes sense. Don, 4 is work-life balance. How does your organization promote a healthy work-life balance, and what effects have you observed from these practices on employee engagement?
So I'll tweak the term work-life balance to work-life integration because I don't think you can balance it. I think something's got to give all the time, right? You can't spend all your time at work or all your time with your family in a really perfectly balanced equation, right? When you're doing one thing, there's an opportunity cost, something's suffering. But what we want to create is an environment where people understand that it's not only okay, but it's expected that if your daughter has something at school at 2 o'clock, that you manage your calendar to where you don't miss it. That if you have to care for a parent or a family member, that we can create the electronic tools that if you need to go take care of something during the day, you can catch up on some work in the evening because you have all the remote tools that you need to be able to do it. What we think is that there should be a sense of fairness on both sides of the equation. And what that means is that we trust our team members to be true professionals, which means their responsibility to their work life integration to communicate with their manager, to ensure they have the tools available for that flexibility, and that flexibility we provide does not mean we're lowering the standard of the output. That means we're flexible on how that output is achieved. And then we integrate those things together. And I think it works well for those that want it to work well. There's been times where people took advantage of that thought process in terms of work-life integration, but most people don't. Most people, when they are trusted by their team member, by their manager, by their company to make good decisions right? And when they need to take time off for something personally, they want to work double time to make sure they don't miss the objectives of the business. And they appreciate whether that flexibility is hybrid work environment, where that flexibility is time and schedule, where that flexibility to communicate that maybe you have some health issues that aren't taking you out of work, but you're not in the mode for a few weeks that you can take on new and bigger projects. That healthy communication and collaboration between the team member and their leadership, I think is an example of how you build trust and loyalty. And work-life integration is a way that you can create that long-term impact. And quite frankly, it becomes a competitive advantage because when you're able to do that for employees, some of your competitors aren't. And it's not all about the money when people decide to stay with you. It's also about the environment and about the flexibility and about the trust that you have in people.
Absolutely right. And Don, I know that you use the term work life integration. I use balance on purpose because people are looking to create this impossible thing, and that's balance, right? To do 100% every week, every day over here, and 100% every day, every week over here. And balance is not an attainable thing, but the integration is such a better term. And I think people need to really get their arms around integration because you can find success there, right? Sometimes I have to be a mom and sometimes I have to focus on work. And, there are things that don't allow me to have a balance, but that's not the measure of success with that work life blend, right? It's an integration. So I appreciate that explanation. Don, 5 is employee feedback, right? So, what processes do you have in place for collecting and acting on employee feedback? And can you share a success story resulting from the feedback?
We do employee surveys, we do pulse surveys, we do one-on-ones with folks in our organization, similar things that we recommend to our clients. We want to make sure that our leaders that went through our leader view training are very strong in their communication, collaboration, those things. So those are kind of the table stakes. What I think is really important in terms of feedbacks in an organization is how do you respond when you get feedback or pushback when your team doesn't think you're doing something well, right? And a couple of instances, and I won't necessarily go into it completely, but there was a time in our growth, right, to where we were, and I'll use we when we win, I when we mess up. I was not as timely as I needed to be in the reviews of our team members. When you're a fast growing startup, or even when I've grown companies larger, like it took me a while to really understand that cadence and that discipline and that investment in HR and HR tools. And so that was brought to me. And one of the things that we did immediately after is we did another employee survey. We reviewed them as a leadership team line by line. And then I went in front of the entire company and walked through every single question, response, critique that we gave and described to our team members which items I completely agreed with and would work on, which ones I'd like some more information, even confidentially, because I didn't fully understand the critique or the question. And then what things I didn't really fully agree, and we probably weren't going to make that change right away. Right. Like, somebody said, we want to be 100% remote work. It's better for my life and XYZ. I was like, fantastic. But we have a hybrid environment. That's our corporate stance. Right. But we can be flexible within that paradigm for outlier items, but we're not going to change the fundamental way that we work. Right. But then there were examples of things that people wanted more and better financial detail on how the health of the company and different things, where we made some moves and created some better charts and some better communication and better cadence. The point that I'm making, Jackie, is it's not so much just the tools you use, pulse surveys, different things of that nature. It is the ability for the leadership to own that feedback and follow up and follow through. And that is the big thing that organizations are missing. Is people capture a lot of data, but they don't use the data to change leadership behavior and improve the environment. And that's something that we've been able to do and still continue work on doing it. Tomorrow morning, we have a team breakfast because one of the points of feedback, the diversity movement was just acquired by Workplace Options, which we're a small, growing, fast-growing technology-enabled consultancy, and we got scooped up by a bigger player, right? And we're excited about it, and it's awesome and all that good stuff. But our core team didn't want to lose that unit cohesion that we developed over the 4 years, right? So several folks in a recent survey said they'd like some time to get together and not talk about business on heavy topics, but just connect with their teammates. So tomorrow we're having a catered breakfast come in. We're going to get to work. We're going to have a little time to just fellowship. We took the team a couple of weeks ago and had a bourbon tasting for those that partake in adult beverages. And those are things that I can get in a work mode, guilty, right? But listening to that feedback, we're able to put some things in place to create that emotive connectivity that a lot of our team really, really craves. So those are a couple of examples of taking those learnings, putting them into practice, right? And communicating what you agree with and what you're willing to change and grow in to your team.
And finally, Don, number 6 is engaging leadership. You just gave some examples of how leaders within your organization actively engage with employees. Can you provide examples of leadership practices that have significantly impacted engagement levels beyond the get-togethers?
Yeah, thank you for that. So one of the things that I think is really important is to create an environment within your team that people bring you their project work early. And let me tell you why, and let me explain in detail what I mean. As a business leader, people want to impress you. They want their gold star. They want to give you the right answer. But the more complex your business is, the larger your clients, the bigger your business, the harder it is for people to get things right the first time. So when people are working on a project, let's say, for example, in the diversity movement, we're looking at building out a plan to globalize all of our content across 10 different languages. Well, we've never done that before, right? It's a big task. So maybe we shouldn't do it on all 10 languages that we're focused on. Maybe we should start with 3. And maybe we should start with 3 languages and not against 20 products that we have. Maybe we should do it against 3 languages and 3 products that we have. And maybe not take it all the way to the end, but let's look at step by step the project plan together. And as the leader, get granular with your team so that we're working on it in collaboration versus bring me this robust plan that's perfect first version that I see it. And so leaders have to understand to create engagement when they need to be that referee, that umpire, that evaluator of what good looks like. And then when you need to get engaged at a granular level with your team and help work problems and opportunities as a part of the team. Because what I found is this: if I give feedback, let's say I'm working with a content team and they're writing a white paper that we want to target executives about cultural awareness and cultural improvement within an organization. And I see the white paper at the end and the team sends me a final version. And then I send 10 to 15 comments. That team feels bad that they missed the mark. That feedback doesn't come across as constructive feedback. It comes across as criticism. If that same document I saw at 70% complete and was able to add my comments within the editorial process, now my comments are a part of that editorial process and aren't taken as criticism, but healthy teamwork. And so what I had to learn as a leader is the timing of when you give critique is very important, because anytime it's at the end when someone's delivering you a final result, it always, and I'm using the term always, which I very rarely do, but I've seen this over decades now, it always comes across as criticism. When you provide that feedback earlier in flight, version 1, beta version, then that feedback is constructive, part of the team, and then it minimizes the mismatch between your expectations as a leader, and what the team delivers. And it's a hardwire change actually for team members, because team members aren't used to letting the leadership in early because they feel like a little protective of it because they want it to be right. I will tell you, it is easier, better, smarter, more efficient, more effective at about 70 to 80% completion to hit some milestone checkpoints to make sure everyone's on track with what that ultimate deliverable will be. If we really step back and look at a macro example, right? Boeing, that's having a lot of quality issues with their airplanes. And you think about quality issues with an airplane. That means you're having quality issues with something that people are flying in, that they've trusted their lives on the quality of. Well, Boeing made a decision to move their corporate headquarters thousands of miles away from their engineering headquarters. And they broke 100-year-long synergy between management and engineering. Because proximity and distance creates gaps in understanding. Sometimes hybrid's good, sometimes email's good, sometimes Zoom is good. But sometimes being in a conference room together reviewing things gets a better product for all, better safety for all, and quite frankly, better collaboration for all. And so those are some of the things that I think about in terms of creating that engagement as it drives a high quality output.
Awesome. Don, this has been a great conversation, rich in actions and initiatives to ensure leaders are creating the environment for employees to deliver their best work. Let's wrap up with a couple of final questions if we can. The first is reflecting on our discussion. What do you believe is the most critical factor in ensuring high employee engagement within an organization?
Building trust. The reason, and I'll be brief, is because it's something that you can lose in an instance. And so you've got to actively be building that trust, that follow-up mentality when people give you feedback, that ability to have that care on calls where you just slow down and ask people how they're doing before you dive into the topic, because maybe today isn't the day for high octane feedback. And you can usually sense that in the way people answer that, some of those initial questions. But I would say building and maintaining trust.
Perfect. And then looking ahead, how do you see the role of employee engagement evolving in the future, especially with the rise of remote work and digital workplaces?
Digital workplaces has created a highly effective way to get more and better work done in certain industries, in knowledge work in particular. The difference is the distance doesn't allow for deep connection with your team. It allows you to get work done, but it's harder to build that trust and loyalty with people you're not spending that physical proximity with. And so as leaders, you have to be intentional in making sure you have those moments where you can get people together, but also in the digital realm, we have to not make every conversation transactional. We have to spend time letting people share what's going on, how they're doing, right? Sharing a picture of their kids at a cheer competition or at a spelling bee or at a football game, and really care enough to ask those questions, because those are things that naturally come up in an in-office environment that you have to be a little bit more intentional in the Zoom driven environment.
Awesome. Don, thank you for this conversation. Such an important topic and one that, needs to be unfolded a little bit, right? We hear again employee engagement, but what does that mean? How do we action on it? How do we measure it? So thank you for this conversation.
It's been a lot of fun. This is a phenomenal topic, and you always pull out the best in everybody you interview. So I'm glad I got some of your time today. This is super fun.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you for joining us on High Octane Leadership with Donald Thompson. Today's episode is a step in our collective journey towards leadership excellence. Remember, every story we share and every insight we gain is a piece in the puzzle of our leadership journey. For more insight and detail, hit the subscribe button so that we can stay connected. For deeper information and more episodes, go to donaldthompson.com. Continue to lead with vision and purpose, and until we meet again, embrace your role as a high-octane leader in the ever-evolving world of business.